I'm on my spare. Yes, at like 11:30. Maybe a little bit before that, but yes.
Wow.
Yeah, no, I did get that taken care of. Hi, everyone. As another reminder, we are about to start our breakout sessions. In here, we have Eclipse planning for underserved communities. Down the hall, we have the college and universities group. Downstairs, we have pre-K to 12 formal and informal education. And also downstairs, we have planning for museums and planetariums.
All right, everyone. Somehow I got the beautiful honor of sort of, I said, corralling all of you and our speakers. So if Cody and Anita and Ariana could come to the stage. Are you Cody? Hello there. And let's see. Anita and Ariana is coming back up here. Nice to meet you. All right, so it appears that, let me make sure, Dan gave me an instruction, making sure the folks here in Zoom land can hear us. Looks all right. Are you guys good out there? Give me a thumbs up. All right. So I know still waiting on Anita. but many of you had that opportunity to hear her. And I think that Cody is just now joining us. And so if you all, okay, hello, Anita, come on down. I see her. So again, as we've just finished this panel about diverse communities, diverse needs, again, thinking about anybody and everybody is the real key here. My heart, of course, is always going to be for the K through 12 students. It's where I spent the last 30 years of my life supporting and doing outreach to that particular age group, and really specifically 3rd through 8th grade. I was telling Kelly that one of my most interesting experiences during the pandemic is 2020 was going to be one of my biggest years of outreach on the road, et cetera. And of course, we know what happened there. And we quickly went online, offered things for free. Anita, come on up and join. Yeah. And over time, and then I got a grant, it's like kids would reveal things privately in the chat because they wanted, and especially those that we served for the full school year of between 2020 and 2021. And there was an overwhelming percentage of those students that were either ADHD, ADD, anxiety disorder, or spectrum. And they would talk to you about it. We didn't poll or pry or anything like that, but they would talk or go give you indications. So to that, as I was talking with Kelly, even thinking about, we've become so accustomed, and especially for those communities that won't be in the path of totality and cannot travel there, considering even another chance way is to have that hybrid event where anyone can access it and watch it even via Zoom, because in some ways that is comfortable to some folks. But without further ado, let's invite Cody up here. He's from the University of Texas, San Antonio. Welcome.
Hello, Yate She Cody client shared this national target Lini Bashin, but Anita She, but Anita Shale, what ego Dinenishle. What I just said is hello, my name is Cody. My name is Cody Clay. I'm Navajo. My clans are Mountain Cove clan, Born for Water Flows Together clan. Both my grandparents, maternal and paternal, are both within his covers clan. Oh yeah. I'm currently a grad student at University of Texas at San Antonio. I come from the Navajo Nation. I grew up there. I was raised in a semi-traditional home. So one goal with the solar eclipse is that Navajos often refer to the solar eclipse as Johanna A. Das Tom, meaning that the sun is dying. So when a solar eclipse does happen, it's an event traditionally it's an event for us where we take time and we are not supposed to observe the eclipse because at the moment the moon and the sun are joining together. It's a very intimate moment because it's a time of death and rebirth of the sun itself, is what we believe in. That goes the same for a lunar eclipses, where we believe it's the death and rebirth of the moon. So this happens at least twice a year. But these are just really significant events for us. And we were told that we weren't supposed to view these eclipse events, but we do know on the Navajo Nation that there are traditional practicing and non-traditional practicing. What I'm doing is I'm working with the Navajo Nation. I've made contact with the Navajo Nation. I'm working with them and trying to get a PSA out there about the annular eclipse. And for us during 2024, there is still going to be a partial eclipse out there as well. And so it's just getting the word out ahead of time. And so I'm working with the chapter I grew up at is an easy chapter. So I'm working with them, hopefully to get a PSA distributed out to a lot of to the broader Navajo Nation itself, and just to any Navajo out there who would like to know more about this. But what I'm doing is I'm not saying that you need to view these things. I'm working with more along the lines of being influenced by traditional values. So it's more of like taking time to explain what's happening, at the same time what the Navajo cultural practices are, the best practices if you do observe tradition. But then at the same time, what I want to do in this announcement as well is just talk to the people who do want to view the eclipse and just talk to them and how to view it safely, what to do, what to look for. So that's what I'm doing with the Navajo Nation. But if you are trying to reach out to your local tribal communities, you just need to Google what tribes are in your communities as well, and just look for most likely a council, because councils usually tribal structure just goes from, they'll have a tribal president or a tribal council. And so you just need to make an initial reach out to them. If not, you can just reach out to a tribal school and look for people to reach out to and ask around. And some of them will be happy to help and or help organize events, or just, work with you to get an announcement out there and just learn what tribal practices and what their views on solar eclipses are out there. So, yeah. Oh, yes.
I'm going to get you a mic.
Feels very formal. Thank you so much for sharing. I was just wondering what format your PSAs are going out in.
At the moment, it's just like a little text, just a little Word document. It just has like a brief introduction of solar eclipses, what they are, and then it just leads into what you're supposed to do traditionally, things you can do. So usually whenever there's an eclipse, we're not supposed to look at it. We're not supposed to go outside. We're not supposed to eat, drink. It's just a time of reverence. It's a time to reflect, plan for the future. Oftentimes so a long time ago, there were ceremonies that people practice in case someone did get caught outside in an eclipse or they didn't know. But some people say they don't know the ceremonies anymore, but it's just something that I think we need to look more into as well. Some people take this time as well just to pray. Some people will just pray for the sun, or at the same time, they'll just pray for other things. And it's just more of like a key moment to spend with family. So it's all oriented, so it's just trying to orient the announcement into form of something we call Ke, which is just family. So Navajo structure is mainly more family-based oriented. So yeah, for now, it's just in a text document. So yep.
I am Chip Stack with Genesee Transportation Council, and I think one of the most important things he said was try to find out what the culture is of the native folks near you. What we learned in Rochester by having some folks in our local planning group, just like any culture, there's variation, and like the Navajo don't observe the eclipse or don't look at it, but there's other tribes and other nations that do. And it's like I said, I think the key takeaway is reach out to folks in your area to understand what their culture practices, so that you can be respectful of that culture and share resources. I think we heard it yesterday. It's like, well, don't force people out there if that's not what they want. And many other cultures are going to share different practices. So again, find out for the people that practice it, how they feel about it.
Thanks, Cody. That was actually really interesting. And I have a question. I'm in Australia and we're preparing for the eclipse in April next year. Everyone is really keen to know about the Aboriginal understandings of it. And like you're saying, there's different cultures and beliefs about what's happening. How do you suggest we go about trying to include these groups in outreach? So for example, we're working with some of the elders and encouraging them to so like Aboriginal astronomy tools are very, very popular, and the elders are really so amazing at being able to share the night sky, and people are fascinated and wanting to hear that. But it's encouraging them to create opportunities to do that. So we want them to share, but yeah, it can be a bit hard sometimes. Any suggestions?
Well, it's a tough one because I'm not really familiar with Aboriginal tribes out in Australia, but I think it's more of like a storytelling, like just knowing the tribal structure and how things are. Like with Navajos, we've never written anything down. The written Navajo language is only, I do believe it was developed like in the 80s and 70s. So we barely started writing our language and our teachings down, but a lot of it's passed down orally. So oral tradition might be what happens with some of these tribes. So it's probably just best to talk with them and see how they disseminate information. You know, some tribes do paintings like, I don't know if it's okay to talk to, but I'm just gonna tell you, but usually when we do Navajo ceremonies, they're always done in a hoganum, a hoan. So when we do these ceremonies, usually time it's a special place, and usually it involves doing something that's called sand paintings. And so these sand paintings are very intricate artistic designs, sort of like how you see in I'm forgetting those monks, they have Tibetan monks. So we do really elaborate sand paintings in some of these ceremonies, and these sand paintings are they tell elaborate stories of creation or just something, a story or depicting an event that happens in Navajo history. So sometimes some of these things are just done, I don't want to say behind closed doors, but just away from a lot of people, because it's sort of more of it's a sacred event.
Welcome to the ROC Museum of Science. Join me in 5 minutes on the first floor in the back of Expedition Earth for a science encounter called Cloud on the Bottom. That's right, in just 5 minutes on the first floor in the back of Expedition Earth, join me for a science encounter called Cloud on the Bottom. See you there.
Should we all go? Oh, but yeah, it's more of like talking to these Aboriginal tribes and seeing what their tribal structure are, is just reaching out and just engaging them more, just trying to tell them your goals, like, you know, just inform them that there is going to be a solar eclipse there, and that we want to know what your traditional values are and how your tribe views them. And so, you know, it's better to get the word out there if it's better in written languages, or if it's like better to do a radio announcement. Because I know in the Navajo Nation, it's we have I want to say just two main ones that we have are KNDN and KTNN. So it's just a way that these radio stations do play music and all this, but they also just do a lot of PSAs on these radio stations in Navajo. So it's one of these like end goals too, as well, is just to probably try to at least maybe a couple of months or a few months before these events is just have it being played on, not nonstop under it, but, you know, just a reminder every week, like saying, just reminding them. And so like, I know a couple days, yesterday, we were talking about how some places want to, you know, just cancel work for the day. And on the Navajo Nation is what the current administration has been doing for the Navajo Nation president is he does respect those traditional practicing Navajos, and where he will give them administrative leave. He'll give them the morning off if there's a lunar eclipse, because some of these people need to stay up there, because even during lunar eclipses, we can't sleep, eat, or drink, or do anything. It's just reflect and plan for the future. And so what he'll do is he'll give administrative leave to some of these the tribal offices are mainly like the people who work for the tribe, as well as just schools that are controlled by the tribe itself. He'll give them, he'll let them start late, get out early, or start later, or even possibly on that day of the eclipse, he'll probably cancel school. But yeah, so usually it's just more of working with tribal leadership, is because they know how to do things, and plus they are very welcoming sometimes. Well, most of the time they're very welcoming, and because it's something that affects us all as a people, and so it's like it builds on that foundation of and Shidneh sort of thing. So when I say Shidneh, is like my people. So a lot of times when we address people on, like, if we're addressing a huge audience, we say Yat Eshkero Shidneh, meaning like hello, my family and friends, or my family, my people. So
I mean, I loved your response, because it just highlights the eclipse is the event that we're all focused on, but it's deeper than that, isn't it? It's an opportunity to be able to understand different cultures and ways of viewing the world. So I appreciate the work that you're doing, and you're helping us to be able to understand and do the best we can to encourage other cultures and people. So thank you.
thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm Sophie. I work at Rainbow Symphony. As somebody who is not part of a tribe, I look around the room and I see it's, you know, how do you respectfully go into a tribe and honor the cultures, honor everything that's going on, but also help with outreach without being sort of a bossy person within that community that's not local?
That's a really tough question, in all honesty. It's because some people do have that mentality of like people coming in telling us how to live our lives. It's kind of a thing that happens, but I think it would just be like just reaching out to tribal leadership or just reaching out to schools and educators from those respective tribes. So usually it's just working alongside them and not dictating things to them. So yeah.
And can I have the microphone? There are a couple of things in chat. Oh, there's one over there, sorry. It's saying Cody, Carolyn is wanting the Indigenous Education Institute, IEI, is one of NASA HEAT's co-investigating institutions. And she would like to connect with you. So I don't know if you feel comfortable giving some contact information we could put here in the chat or.
Oh,
send out loud.
yeah, it's just, if you want to contact me, it's just gonna be cody.cly@utsa.edu. So cody.cly@utsa.edu.
UTA.
UTSA.
All right. Thank you for that. Any other questions? I'll try to monitor this as well. And I remember being here in Rochester 2019, and there were some Indigenous folks who joined us who said that, you know, we were asking, would they want anybody to open up their land or things? And they were like, nope, that's sacred for us. So and it was very partitioned, that it's like it was special and sacred and something they celebrated, but they were interested in how to be a part of that. So it sounds like there could be different pockets of that, whether people like to keep their traditions to their own communities, right?
Yes, it is pretty big. So like the idea, not the idea, but the fact that sometimes there's places that we hold in high reverence that we like to keep to not to ourselves, but you know, just for ceremonial reasons. Certain times, even there's certain places. I know there's certain places that you can't go unless you're a practitioner or a medicine man, or as in our culture we call them hatathis, meaning that chanters. So there are certain things that you should respect as well as just indigenous like sacred sites. And so sometimes it could just be like the tribe might be celebrating, but it's their way of celebrating either the rebirth of the sun or like just things happening. So yeah.
Any other questions? I guess I would also say to anybody online, any questions for Anita or Allison? A great time to also think about other diverse communities and inclusion. All right, you've got a question here.
Hi, my name is Ivey, and Cody, I was wondering when for relevant materials that might go to the non-public community, should we avoid these images of a person on the material?
Oh yes, that is one of the biggest things I really should encourage a lot of people out there if they're interested in working with tribes that aren't tribes or indigenous people who aren't allowed to view these eclipses. Don't include any images of the event as well. So it's like you can explain what's going on, or you can use like simple figures, like just a line of dots.
Just letting you know that the bay on the lower level is open. It'll be open till 2 o'clock today. We're serving Mark's Pizzeria, subs, salads, and ice cream. And on the lower level of the museum, the cafe will be open till 2 o'clock today.
Yeah, so a lot of times it's just respecting their cultural values and practices, and by not including any images of eclipses would be a big plus. So because a lot of times, well, things I should have mentioned earlier, when viewing eclipses, what we're told is we're not supposed to view them because you might go blind, you could have health problems, it's just disturbing your, it could mess you up mentally and spiritually. So a lot of this stuff comes from the values of what we're taught when we're younger, or when we're growing up. It's all called Hajon, which Hajon itself means it has a lot of English translations. Hajon can either mean beauty, balance, harmony, or just peace. So that's just something as a people we try to achieve, is called Hajon, is just a balance within our lives, or a harmony with nature and all this. So yeah.
Any other questions from any of our other panelists? Anything our panelists would like to add? Or questions?
I guess I should ask, in terms of getting the glasses.
Yes, Rebecca Leclerc Communications, but I'm on the Rochester Task Force, so I've kind of got dual role. I'm thinking in terms of marketing, and making sure that all those communities that are interested in viewing the eclipse have the glasses. And obviously, some of the smaller communities probably don't have access to these, or I'm thinking of marketing so that I can try to find groups that will be willing to provide them to these communities. Does anybody have any experience with, you know, that kind of thing and how to market it?
Is there anybody on the panel who would like to?
So for 2017, I'm Doug Duncan from the University of Colorado. I and 3 other astronomers wrote a grant proposal to the Moore Foundation, and they provided about $500,000, enough to acquire ultimately 2 million glasses distributed to 7,000 libraries. And they were very happy with how that worked out. So for the upcoming eclipse, they've doubled everything, and the plan is to distribute 5 million roughly. So I think, you know, more usefully, local foundations with a very specific proposal, perhaps referring back to how successful 2017 was. I mean, anybody who emailed me, I can mail you a very impressive US map with 7,000 dots. And each one is a library that became an education and eclipse classes center. So I think that might be persuasive to local foundations. You know, you're just asking them to do something that's high impact.
John? I just have a question from the audience.
Great. Sure, your point.
No. A question from our Zoom audience. How are some event organizers, or are you planning to reach out to migrant and undocumented communities? Anybody have that on their list? Which brings us to, again, thinking that these are great things to jot down on our list of things to do and figure out how best to make it accessible for all. I see Kate. Thank you.
That's Kate, being in the shadow. You know, we don't need to go to events to see the total solar eclipse, so we can encourage anyone in the community to experience it in their homes or in their own communities, having a street party. So yeah, I guess it's just education about the fact that people need to see it, and if they can get themselves in a location where they can look out, you can test it in the next couple of months, you know, to see what the sun is going to be like in your particular location at eclipse time. Can you see it from there? So yeah, because I think sometimes the conversation is always about getting people to events, but actually, you know, you can actually have really good, meaningful experiences if you're at home with your own group, your own networks.
Hi, Lisa Berkovich with New York State Division of Homeland Security. One of the ways that we'll be distributing information would be to
Hello, RMSC here. In about 6 minutes upstairs on the 3rd floor, we're going to be doing our first show at the theater, Singing Coils and Singing Lightning and the Faraday Cage. So take the stairs, take the elevator up to the 3rd floor, Adventure Center. You'll see a big wall with lightning on it. That's going to be Electricity Theater. We'll be doing also a 12:30, 1:30, 2:30, and a 3:30 show as well.
thank you. And so, like, for example, one of many, but we have a large population of individuals that reside in group homes in this community. And we would be utilizing our partners. So for the state, that would be OPWDD, which is our official office for the state, working with individuals with disabilities. But we also have other partner agencies, and some of them are open to the public. And we would make sure that, like, for example, if there was a distribution of glasses, we would get them to them and then either provide them with the information to go to events, or as you were just mentioning, some of the group homes would prefer to stay with their group home at their location, and we would be able to provide them with the information as to the best way to do the viewing.
I'm gonna tag them.
I would add on to the question that you had asked earlier too about funding and that piece of it. So here in Rochester, I know that our organization would love to partner on a grant request like that, but because I think, and what you were just talking about, those connections is, and even to the question about the migrant focus, if you can identify the populations that you want to target, then finding the organizations that if you get that pocket, you get that 5 million to have that many sets of glasses out there, then we would help you go distribute in and make sure that the organizations could push down into the individual group homes by working through the bigger organization. So wherever your particular area is in the country, we would encourage you to do that so that you've identified these important groups that you hadn't thought of before. Maybe now, how do you organize to distribute? So there's the funding, and then there's the distribution strategy. For Rochester, we'll be happy to help with that.
Hi, my name is Kelly Corp at NASA Headquarters, and I'm talking a little bit. We were thinking at NASA a lot about different audiences, and all the audiences mentioned already. You know, we're thinking about how to reach. Another one that I don't know if anyone has any experience with is prison population, because again, that's something where they can't necessarily leave the place to go to an event, but is anyone working with providing classes or providing, you know, resources to prison?
We just all said that was a great point. Another great community to pull into this. And when I think about, especially the work we've been doing in the disability community, but that's a great population too. I like tying together the education piece with the glasses. So when you have, you know, we asked the Girl Scouts of Western New York to take on this Eclipse as a thing, well, certainly they can go out on the day of and view it. But again, we've all mentioned that it's what you can do leading up to it, to provide that extra layer of education and the extra layer of excitement and meaning, and even passing along what you were talking about, Cody, the different ways people have experienced this historically as part of the culture, that could be a fascinating addition to everybody's conversation. But I think the prison setting is a great place for that, where there could be a lot of lead up internally for people who want to explore it before the day of the event.
Sophie from Rainbow Symphony again. It reminds me, listening to all this conversation reminds me of a program that we actually do run with schools, and I thought of prison systems, and the outreach part is something that could be a collaborative conversation in this discussion, but we actually have a program that if you do send in a self-addressed stamped envelope with an envelope in return, they can get the glasses for free. So this is something where schools will put in a large manila envelope, like 35 like self-addressed stamped envelopes to and from themselves, and it's a great way for schools maybe without funding or prison programs. The outreach I haven't really been a part of, but that's something that we could talk about. But that's one way that we recommend if you would like to get a free pair of glasses. As long as you send us a stamp, we'll send it to you back. So that's one way to do it.
There's a question in the chat.
Question of my own.
Oh, sure. Rain says our library is planning on getting some free glasses to provide to the community from NASA. Any advice on messaging or other ways to encourage the community and the library to prioritize those in need to have priority on those glasses first? Is that?
I know of another SciAct project funded by NASA called NASA at My Library. And it's run by some really awesome folks. And I'm sure they did glasses distribution in the past, and I would assume they're going to do it again. So I would look up NASA at My Library and contact them, because their team is great and definitely would work with you on this if they're not already doing that work right now.
No responses to that.
I think to the question of, what I heard in that question was, should we be reserving a percentage of our glasses to intentionally give to specific groups? I think that's one way you can go add that, and it would work best if that entity knows how to engage and contact and get those into those houses for those community members. It's not always easy to get out and get to the library to pick up your pair. So are there alternative ways, just like libraries have books on wheels, where they'll deliver books to your house, especially since COVID. So maybe we re-implement that idea as well.
Carolyn, thank you always, hun, for having such great information. She says NASA at My Library -Seals, SEALS, will distribute glasses to public libraries. So there's a way to get them. And, there was a couple of places in Nashville, like youth villages and other places that take in kids from kids who live on the street. And, or, kind of like try to make sure that they have what they need and they have some group homes there. I think it's to Anita's point, is contacting the representatives or the folks who are already doing the good work inside these communities, telling them, or, telling them what you have, asking them what they need. And, thank you, Cody. It's like, yesterday, there's, so many myths out there about different ways people think they're going to happen. And I certainly meant no disrespect. So thank you for a learning moment for me yesterday to go. It's like, culturally, if that's something that is the birth of the death of something, the birth of something, some spiritual renewal, those kinds of things, I want to make sure that I say publicly that was, again, because I think you read some of these things and they become cultural stories, or they seem ancient, or compared to the science, and finding that balance. And it's what I had a conversation with somebody last night about, finding that balance between the science of something and then the belief of someone. And so that is kind of where I was coming from. It was fun for kids to explore these myths and think about when we did the art contest and the video stuff where they were doing stop motion for things, that it was a way for kids to understand it in different ways. So I just want to say I had a learning moment. I'm always willing to learn, but hearing this, it's like, as you can see, it's like with everything that we keep talking about, there's another community that might need our assistance. So I think that's the benefit, or the grandest thing of this talk of inclusion, is that every time we start really communicating with one another, we're learning, we're adding an additional someone to our list to consider. So that's why I think these kinds of conversations are so important, and that we keep connecting. And thank you guys always for letting me be in a position to continue to learn. Can you?
I just wanted to
say
follow up
that
your comment.
address again? For that NASA at My Library -Seals, SEALS.
Janet, thank you for that. Well,
That's the thing is like a lot of some of these stories you do hear about, just events that happen. Some of them do have some common, like they have teaching embedded in them. So they like a lot of times in Navajo when we tell stories, it's for a purpose. It just teaches an overall lesson to someone. But the idea behind these solar eclipses is like, yeah, if you do look at a solar eclipse wrong, you will go blind. So it's just a lot of that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
I'm gonna put myself in the queue. So I'm Tom Rice, American Astronomical Society. I am from a deaf family. I grew up speaking American Sign Language and English bilingually at home. I know Rochester as the place where like my father went to NTID to get his education. And so I'm curious, actually just anyone in the audience or on the panel, do you know of people working on deaf outreach for the solar eclipse in 2024 deaf and signing communities?
So you're the guy they mentioned this morning. I was talking with Dan and Deb prior to the start, and they asked if you were here. Because we were looking specifically at connections to NTID and deaf community. And I'll just tell you what they said in that moment, which was that it is happening. I don't think they've gotten to where they wanted to be with that. So they're looking for more connections.
I'm happy to be part of that.
Excellent. Great. We'll sign you up.
Anybody else in the audience?
Right there.
Great.
Good morning, my name is Matt Jackson with Ohio May. One of the things I got somewhat 2 points. Going to the question that was on the chat about reaching out to immigrants and undocumented. One things that we've done within Ohio was creating posters with different languages on them. That way we reach out to our Somali population that's in the Columbus area, and then also consider with recent events, you might have an Afghanistan population that's been in, you might have a Ukrainian population that's come in with the recent events, and then just kind of understand your communities. And to your point, when you do that translation, is understand the culture, because it may not be appropriate to put up signage that has a picture of the eclipse. To the second point, when we talk about education and the low-income families. So if we're talking more from let's cancel schools that day. Also consider that when we cancel school, that's a food source that kids don't have for that day. So keep that in mind when you plan on that. I know when we started doing things with the pandemic, we figured out that, hey, we could do lunches to go or breakfast to go for the kids that were unable to go into the school. So please keep in mind as we think of those populations as well.
Raise hand over here.
Denise Bill from NASA, and I was wondering kind of a thought and kind of a point to ponder, thinking about as we're thinking about especially minority populations who don't usually are not the traditional eclipse watchers, physicists kind of thing. Are we reaching into the subcultures of that? So boys and girls clubs, to the point after school programs where we know minority students are those of low socioeconomic. So thinking about how are we reaching those basketball programs, little league programs? It's about to get to the community. It's about thinking about the community as a whole, and then we're thinking about them in subcultures. And so like the foodie culture or the skate culture, and thinking about how do we reach them that way. And I know especially in African American cultures, I was a teacher for 10 years, I think is what you said, reaching out to them directly in a place where they already are is how you capture them, and allowing, making sure that the libraries maybe set aside the glasses as was kind of suggested earlier, and then maybe sending them earmarking places to send them so that they get them, or maybe having someone come in and do a little presentation at a Boys and Girls Club or at a after-school program or something like that. Might be a really good way to connect, and that's what we're looking for, is those ways to make those kind of personal connections.
during 2017, I also helped Newberry, South Carolina. And so literally, we went, they basically had me there for a week. And I went to every elementary, every middle school, every high school. And again, through organizations back in Nashville, like Preston Taylor Ministries, it's like there's another one called Dream Center, where they take meals to various housing communities and everything, and that we were able to send with them glasses as they also provided meals in these places. So, because that was still, school had just begun in Nashville, but I think there's a comment here that is like, it sounds like that we sort of need to define who our audience is and then what groups we're going to target. I think I keep coming back to, it's like creating that task force, inviting as many people to the table. There's a great guy in Nashville that has a girls basketball coaching system called Family is Everything. It's like, if this were coming through Nashville again, I'd immediately call Ryan and go, hey, what can we do? And how can you get this to your community of girls you're coaching? And, you know, those, I think starting with those things that are closest to you in your personal thing, and then letting that kind of influence kind of circle out and ripple out. I mean, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the room about that, because there are so many folks that we can reach in different ways. We just have got to get creative to do it, it sounds like.
I agree with that, soundly, obviously. So I think there, it goes back to the intentionality. And just because you might be excited about something doesn't mean that people hear you inviting them to your excitement. And I've noticed that just being on our stakeholder group and task force to help with outreach. I put it out, I blasted it out on our social media after one of our first meetings, you know, 2 years ago, whatever it was, get excited now. And then periodically, and didn't get a lot of feedback at all of any kind. But then recently I've been doing targeted, specific. I know this person within this subgroup. I'm going to reach out and extend an invitation for them to come to this table. And so now I've emailed them personally. And now I'm getting responses. And the responses have been very interesting. Oh, you know, I heard that our organization, which was a really big service organization in our community that provides services to people with disabilities. I heard about that. I heard that it was in our conversation, but I hadn't paid attention yet. But I'm really glad to hear you connect me to Dan Schneiderman, and hi, Dan, and I'm on board. Tell me more. So that's what you want to do, because I don't want to go run programming for them on April 8th or leading up to April 8th, but I want them to come and talk to Dan and Deb and this whole task force and figure out what they can do to push into their specific community. So I think it's that no matter which of the groups we talked about, is find a person and make a personal invitation, because then they'll end up letting you know, well, it's not going to be me, but it is. And I've had that happen in one organization. She just passed it 2 doors down, literally, in their organization. Said, can you, here's Anita, talk to Anita. And then that resulted in a Zoom call. And now we have 2 new members of a task force specifically looking at their target group, their circle, their subgroup that they're working with. So I think it can work very nicely that way.
Okay, yeah, I didn't introduce myself before. Sorry. I'm Kelsa from Science Foundation. I'm loving this conversation. One of the things that I'm wondering about is, I'm forgetting your name from Rainbow Symphony, use the word bossy. I think another way that, so thank you. Sorry to associate you with. And I think, yeah, I mean, another term that's used in this context is colonial, right? And I'm wondering like bringing people into your task force, certainly, right? But even the idea of being involved in a task force to some communities is you're gonna run the wrong way. Like, what? You want me to do what? And so I'm interested in those initiations and early outreach conversations with community leaders and people who can sort of like be your trusted disseminators of knowledge, or at least your points of contact, right? Like, Cody, you were talking about with the leaders. What kind of level of information, and I think a lot of this comes down to resource distribution, which is why I was asking you about what your PSA like looks like and feels like. How do you not overwhelm folks, and how do you kind of call them in without without just sort of being like, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this, like build the excitement, build the enthusiasm, without being like, our perspective is the only perspective, and do what we do, copy paste in your community. And I know this is a complicated and layered question, so like no pressure, but if anybody has thoughts on that.
I'm probably not just gonna speak for all tribal communities, because they all have their own way of communicating with yeah, because you did bring up the word I was trying to avoid this whole time, was colonialism. So, but it's still a yes, but it's still a big thing about us, is about some tribal, about a lot of us, is that we still do feel the effects of colonialism, not just once in a while, but every day we feel the effects of colonialism. So it's just that idea of like making contact and just asking them how they view eclipses, and asking them like if you're reaching out to tribal communities, because before colonialism there was a huge population of different tribes and different belief systems and everything. And so, you know, because
Stephanie Mildred come to the front desk. Stephanie Mildred, please, to the front desk.
yeah, because from the West Coast to the East Coast, there was a huge diverse population of Native Americans here, and so they all had their own unique beliefs. And so it's just asking them before you start giving them a lot of information, because sometimes, you know, we've all been there when we find something we really like and we initially learn about it. It's just we're overwhelmed sometimes. We can't really respond. So it's just asking
Ladies
them
and gentlemen,
about
boys and girls, welcome to the RBC Museum and Science Center as we celebrate National Chemistry Week. Come on down to the first floor and check out some great chemistry experiments as we learn all about materials. Meet student scientists from RIT and University of Rochester and try some great hands-on experiments to make your own slime to take home. Come on downstairs, it's on the first floor, right outside the front desk. National Chemistry Week.
But it is a learning opportunity for you, and also for some of these people that you make initial contact with, they might not know. So they'll have to go to their family members or someone in the tribe who does know, because a lot of times tribal communities are closely knit places. So you might just meet someone who's like, you know, just off the street and be like, oh yeah, you know, so-and-so, and like they might be the councilman's aunt, or, you know, sister, or, you know, just their cousin. So it's just finding how to talk to them, and finding how their cultures and people view these things, and then asking if they are interested for outreach, or if they would like some information, or just sometimes even dates and times. So I know some Navajo influencers out there who do go onto their social media maybe a week or two or a day before an eclipse and just post the date and time of when the eclipse is, and just like let their followers know who are traditionally practicing. But at the same time, it could help other tribal members who didn't grow up on the reservations, who didn't grow up around cultural teachings, to learn about who they are and where they come from, just, you know, cultural values as well.
I really love that. And just to play back what I'm hearing is like, in your community, and probably this extends to many others as well. I've been thinking, Denise, about what you said about going where people are, right? Especially with youth, is making an opportunity, a moment for like discursive exchange before saying, here's the thing, like, here's everything that we know about it, here's all the information, opening a conversation, which I think for organizers and community folks sounds like we've talked about the necessity of creating ample time for planning eclipse activities. But this to me feels like a piece that is just, if you get this wrong, right, the implications are really far reaching, and it adds an additional kind of planning and community time overhead for the logistics people in the room. But yeah, I think that's really powerful, and I really appreciate you going into this one.
Thank you.
Yeah, anybody else? We're about 11 minutes away from lunch. So any other additional thoughts? Anybody out there in Zoom land have a question or comment?
So Abby and I were talking, she's from that. We were talking about, as we're working on our communication strategy. And for everything we put out, there's always the why should I care, the why, getting to the why. And so for each of these communities, thinking about the why and thinking about, and it's gonna be different for each one. We were thinking about kids in foster care. Like, it's just a nice distraction. It's free. And it gives them a moment to dig in, find the information for themselves, and be distracted and enjoy it. It's not about turning them into the next scientist or engineer. It's just the distraction at that moment. Or for those that dance, it's the choreography of the sun, the earth, the moon, all at the same time, the synchronization of how they move together to form this perfect moment. And being able to, for each one of those communities that we are focusing on, thinking about what is the why, and, thinking about a kid that's really into sports, really into basketball or something like that, something like physics of movement and things like that. It's connecting intentionally to people's why and why should they care, or why should they be involved. And so when I worked at Health and Human Services and ran their COVID campaign for minorities before taking on this position. And when we reached out to community leaders in different communities, that was the question that they answered all the time, asked all the time. Why? Why should we care? There's something else to tell our community who trusts us to do a thing. So why should we? What are the answers to these questions? And so I think being intentional is the key word. And I think maybe thinking about our messaging, kind of writ large, and then how do we do, we're picking out these communities, and how do we make sure that our message is focused and isn't just something that is erroneous and important to us, and making sure it's important to them. I think it's just very key. And if we can help with that in any way, that's why we're here, to hear what's important and what people struggle with, and what does it feel like locally? How do we simplify that? So if there's anything we can do.
Any last words from our panel? Any last questions from our audience? Oh, hold, I've got one from the thing. This is more about serving children during the Eclipse Day. What approximate percentage of Eclipse will have children K through 12 with them? There are different thoughts within our stakeholders, and we want to make sure to not over or under program for them on Eclipse Day for Eclipse visitors. Anybody? My personal thought is we had freestanding stations at every place at the Adventure Science Centers, Eclipse Festival. With every 2 or 3 tents, we had a place for scientific engagement and a kids activity. And a lot of times they would stand there with their parents. I'm thinking this is, and to your point, it's like that's the perfect time to do the why, and it's the perfect time to have sensory activities and to really be thoughtful and intentional about what those are. But I'm not sure, and again, this is my favorite thing to do, is that you can have too much to engage the kids, but I'd love to hear from anybody else who might have thoughts on that. Right, looks like rain. This is a good question. By and large, the folks at the Adventure Science Center were either longtime members and pass holders, or mostly visitors from out of town. I would say that a larger community of people who came out to that were actually coming in town for the festival and for the Eclipse event. That'd be interesting. I don't know about for anybody who was in the 2017. I mean, Doug, what was your? You took 300 people to the path. So in your world, do you think it's more visitors coming to these places than locals?
I think the way they seem to actualize it here in Rochester is a good way to think about it. You have truly locals who live here, but you have kind of like the big neighborhood who comes here. And then you have those who come from far away. So I think you make a big difference on the number of far away folks by the way you advertise yourself and make things easy. So I think there's really kind of like three components the way I think about it.
Attention all RMS Museum and Science Center visitors. Just your friendly reminder that the cafe on the lower level is open till 2 o'clock today. They're serving pizza from Mark's Pizzeria, subs, salads, and ice cream. Again, it's located on the lower level of the museum. The cafe will be open till 2 o'clock today. It's ice cream.
And I guess in some ways, serving the regional audience seems most important to me because they're numerous, but they don't live here. So they need all these services, right? Places to eat and porta potties and all those kinds of things. So I think that's a useful way of thinking about who's coming. I also think that each place needs to think about its own physical environment. Okay, I mean, the thing that a lot of people didn't anticipate till we reminded them in Wyoming was sunburn. Okay, it's a long time out in the partial eclipse, and if there's not a place to shelter a whole bunch of people with skin like me, you know, it's bad. Whereas here, you might worry about keeping people warm. And so you got to be prepared for that too. And, you know, again, for the people who truly live, they got their house, they got places they can go. So I think the most numerous people who need help probably are your region.
I'll add to that too, with the idea that for here in Rochester, we have our greater Rochester area and very quickly are in rural communities, very, very quickly. So if we're expecting everybody to come into this small area of the city, what are we doing for the other communities? And whether we have target populations, everyone that we mentioned today, from prison settings to group home settings, all of those exist in the rural communities too. So how are we ensuring that we're messaging correctly in those areas and getting the materials out to those areas as well?
Could I have one more comment? It is always much, much easier and usually more successful to make use of existing networks and connections. And that's why I think the libraries was a brilliant idea, because libraries are all over the place. I would suggest your other friend is the weather broadcaster. Okay, that's the one, almost every place is interested in the weather. And there's always somebody delivering it. In terms of TV, as you probably know, if there's going to be a scientist in the building, it's the meteorologist. And a lot of them have quite an interest in eclipses. And so in terms of getting the word out, you know, statewide and to little places, I would vote for libraries and meteorologists.
All right, well, it is, oh, look, another question there. Hi, Kelly Court, and again, I just actually wanted to thank everyone for this discussion because it's really, I see the eclipse as something that can be very healing for the entire US and the, I'm getting all emotional, the inclusion of folks and really thinking about it and taking that time to sit with people and really learn what they're about. That's so healing in so many different ways. I mean, it's about the eclipse, but it can serve so many other ways. And really help us in general as a population be able to sit and build those relationships and think about those relationships long term with the native population or with peasants or with children, boys and girls, plus other things. So thank you all for your. So with that, we taki yasin. And bless the good, bless our good for, now I'm getting teary. Blessings to the land that we are standing on. and the first peoples that were here and took care of this land. So again, thank you all. Thank you for this beautiful conversation. I believe lunch will be served moments from now, and please connect with any of these great people. So thank you. All right, for our online audience, you have a break and lunch. We will be right back at 1 p.m. Thank you. Thank you. It's many other thoughts, right? This is that. This is a bonus. I mean, I suppose. You might. You don't want. Yeah. What was right. That